Imagine this. It's 2025, and fight fans all over the world are buzzing about one question. What if Khabib Nurmagomedov and Conor McGregor stepped into the octagon one more time? Khabib, the Eagle, is still remembered as the undefeated king of the lightweight division. 29 wins, 0 losses. His game? Relentless wrestling, unmatched control on the ground, and the ability to break opponents mentally before finishing them. His most legendary nights? The submission win over Dustin Poirier, the dominant finish of Justin Gaethje, and of course UFC 229, the night he made McGregor tap. Conor, the notorious McGregor, on the other hand, is MMA's biggest star. His striking is sharp, precise, and deadly. Just ask Jose Aldo, who went down in 13 seconds. He's the first man to hold 2 UFC belts simultaneously, and when he's locked in, he can end a fight with one punch. So, who would win today? If Khabib can still chain wrestle and control on the mat, he likely dominates again. But if Conor keeps the fight standing and lands early, anything can happen. This is the clash of styles that made MMA history, and fans still dream about a rematch. When you look at Khabib versus Conor, the first thing everyone talks about is the clash of styles, ground game versus striking power. It's what made their first fight so fascinating, and it's what would make a rematch just as exciting. Khabib is a monster once the fight hits the ground. He doesn't just take you down, he keeps you there. His wrestling is relentless. He chains takedowns together, traps your legs, and slowly breaks you down while landing shots from the top. That ground and pound style is exhausting for anyone on the bottom. Even elite fighters who are used to wrestling have been crushed under Khabib's pressure. His control is so good that opponents often look frustrated, almost hopeless, by the second or third round. Conor, on the other hand, wants no part of that ground game. His strength is on the feet, his boxing is crisp, his timing is elite, and his left hand has knocked out some of the best fighters in the world. He's a master of distance. He likes to keep opponents at range, pick his shots, and land that perfect punch that changes everything. That's what makes this matchup so interesting. If Conor can keep the fight standing, his chances of winning skyrocket. If Khabib gets him down early, it's probably going to be another long night for Conor. It's a classic striker versus grappler matchup, the kind of fight that MMA fans love because you never know whose game plan will take over first. And that's why people still argue about this fight years later. It's the ultimate question: can Conor stop the takedown, or will Khabib drag him into deep water again? If you want to understand why Khabib versus Conor was such a big deal, you have to look at their battle over takedowns. This is the heart of their rivalry. Khabib is relentless when it comes to takedowns. He doesn't just shoot once and give up. He chains his attempts together. If you block the first try, he'll switch to another move, grab a leg, trip you, drag you toward the cage. He's like a machine that never stops. Even if you stuff him a few times, you're spending energy, and eventually you get tired. That's when he finally gets you down. And once you're on the mat, it's usually game over. He's a master at using the cage to trap you. He'll pressure you, cut off your angles, and force you backward until your back touches the fence. That's where he's most dangerous. From there, it's easier for him to grab you, lift, trip, and bring the fight where he wants it, the ground. Conor's takedown defense is actually better than people give him credit for. He uses good balance, wide stance, and quick hips to stay standing. In the early rounds against Khabib, he stuffed a few attempts and made him work hard. But that's the thing with Khabib. You have to defend every single attempt for the whole fight. One slip, one slow reaction, and he drags you down. This is why their fights are so tense, and Conor wants to keep the fight standing where his left hand is deadly. Khabib wants to take him down, control him, and wear him out. Every moment is a tug of war between those two goals, and that's what keeps fans glued to the screen. When you look at Khabib and Conor, one of the biggest differences is how they handle getting hit, their durability and defense. This part of fighting doesn't always get the headlines, but it's a huge factor when you think about who wins over 5 tough rounds. Khabib is one of the hardest guys to hit clean in the UFC. If you look at his fights, he barely absorbs any significant strikes. Opponents spend so much time defending takedowns and trying to stay upright that they rarely throw big combinations. Even when they do land, Khabib just walks through it. He has a great chin, stays calm, and never looks rattled. You never really saw Khabib get rocked or knocked down, and that's part of why he was so dominant. It's tough to beat a guy who seems unshakable. Conor's defense is built around timing and distance. When he's fresh, he's slick, pulling back, slipping punches, countering with that famous left hand. In the early rounds, he looks almost untouchable, but the problem comes later. As the fight goes on, his movement slows, his reactions fade, and he starts taking more shots. We've seen him get hurt, dropped, and even finished when fights drag into deeper waters. So when these two face each other, this difference matters a lot. Khabib can take a few clean shots and keep moving forward, which gives him more chances to grab that takedown. Conor, meanwhile, has to make those early punches count because if Khabib keeps walking through them, it's going to be a long night. This is why their clash is so exciting. One man is nearly impossible to break, the other has the power to end it early if he lands just right. Another big difference between Khabib and Conor is how they handle the pace of a fight and how they look for a finish. These two couldn't be more different in this area, and that's what makes their matchup so dramatic. Khabib is all about the long game. He doesn't rush in looking for a knockout in the first 30 seconds. Instead, he takes his time, slowly cranking up the pressure. First round, he's usually just testing you, making you work, dragging you to the mat, and forcing you to carry his weight. Round after round, he makes you more tired, more frustrated until you're out of gas. Then he finishes either by pounding away on the ground until the ref steps in, or by locking up a submission when you finally make a mistake. It's not explosive, but it's suffocating, and it almost always works. Conor, on the other hand, is like a sprinter. He comes out fast, looking for that big shot right away. When he lands, it's beautiful. Just ask Jose Aldo, who went out in 13 seconds, or Eddie Alvarez, who couldn't survive Conor's clean combos. The catch? If Conor doesn't get the early finish, the fight starts to turn against him. His gas tank runs low, his punches lose power, and his opponent often takes over. That's why this clash is so fascinating. Conor needs to win early before Khabib's grinding style wears him down. Khabib just needs to survive that first round storm because the longer the fight goes, the more it tilts in his favor. When you talk about Khabib versus Conor, you can't skip the mental side of things because that's where so much of their story actually happened. This wasn't just two fighters meeting in a cage. It was a psycho. Conor McGregor has always been the king of trash talk. He's loud, he's clever, and he knows how to push buttons. Before UFC 229, he turned the entire fight buildup into a circus. Every press conference was full of wild quotes, insults, and jokes aimed at Khabib, his team, and even his country. Conor uses that energy to hype the fight and, more importantly, to mess with his opponent's head. He wants them emotional, reckless, ready to make mistakes when the Khabib? Completely different approach. He didn't play Conor's game. He stayed cool, calm, and laser-focused the whole time. That's what makes him dangerous. You just can't shake him. Inside the cage, he uses the same mindset. He's not in a rush. He doesn't get desperate or frustrated. He applies pressure little by little until you break, both physically and mentally. When they finally fought, we saw exactly how this played out. Conor looked sharp early but couldn't get under Khabib's skin enough to throw him off his plan. Khabib kept pushing forward, stayed patient. So this matchup is more than a clash of skills. It's a clash of personalities. Conor is fire, Khabib is ice. One tries to win the fight before it even starts, the other stays unshakable and finishes the job when the cage door closes. If Khabib and Conor ever fought again, it would be one of the biggest money fights in MMA history, maybe even bigger than their first clash. Back at UFC 229, Conor made about $3 million just to step into the cage, and Khabib got $2 million. That doesn't even include all the extras. Both guys took home a share of the pay-per-view money, which is where the real payday came from. That event sold around 2.4 million PPVs at about $65 a pop, which means tens of millions went to the fighters after the UFC took its cut. Add ticket sales from the sold-out arena, sponsorships, and all the merchandise sold during Fight Week, and UFC 229 brought in well over $170 million in total revenue. Now fast forward to 2025. If they fought again, their base pay would almost certainly be higher, probably $4 to $5 million each just to show up. And since a rematch would break the internet, it could easily sell over 2.5 million PPVs worldwide. That means both fighters could walk away with $20 and $30 million each, maybe even more, if the UFC sweetens the deal. In short, this fight wouldn't just be massive for the fans, it would be a massive payday for everyone involved, from the fighters to the promotion. It would dominate headlines, crash social media, and set a new standard for what a super fight really means. If Khabib and Conor ever agreed to fight again, the build-up wouldn't just be about trash talk and press conferences, they'd both need serious time to prepare. For a fight this big, you're looking at a full training camp, and in MMA that usually means about 8 to 12 weeks. Conor is known for doing long, intense camps when he's locked in. He'd probably spend the first few weeks focusing on cardio and weight management, then work nonstop on takedown defense, because he knows that's Khabib's main weapon. In the last few weeks, he'd shift to sparring and sharpening his striking, timing that famous left hand for the perfect counter. Khabib, even though retired, wouldn't take this lightly. He'd need at least 10 to 12 weeks to get back to peak shape. His camp would focus on wrestling, conditioning, and drilling that suffocating top control he's famous for. He'd spar with fresh partners round after round to simulate fight pressure and keep his grappling sharp. And of course, a fight like this would come with a huge media tour. You'd see face-offs in New York, Dublin, Abu Dhabi, maybe even Las Vegas. There would be interviews, press conferences, open workouts, the whole world watching as the tension builds. By the time fight week arrives, both fighters would be in the best shape possible, the hype would be off the charts, and fans would be counting down the hours to see who walks out the winner this time. When we talk about a Khabib versus Conor rematch, one of the most exciting parts is what it would mean for their legacies. For Conor, this fight could be the ultimate redemption story. People still talk about how dominant Khabib was in their first fight. He took Conor down, controlled him, and made him tap. If Conor could somehow come back in 2025 and beat Khabib, it would be one of the biggest comeback moments in MMA history. It would remind everyone why he was the first fighter to hold two UFC belts at the same time and put him right back in the conversation as one of the greatest ever. For Khabib, this would be about proving once again that nobody in the lightweight division can touch him, even after years away from the cage. He left the sport undefeated at 29-0, which is almost unheard of. If he came back, beat Conor again, and left with a perfect 30-0 record, that would cement him as one of the greatest fighters of all time, no questions asked. That's why this fight wouldn't just be about money. It would be about pride, history, and who gets remembered as the true king of the division. If Khabib and Conor ever fought again, their game plans would be completely focused on what happened the first time. Conor knows exactly what went wrong. Khabib took him down, almost at will, controlled him on the ground, and wore him out. So this time, Conor's camp would probably spend weeks just drilling takedown defense. His main goal would be to stay on his feet, keep the fight in striking range, and land that big left hand early before Khabib can drag him down. We'd likely see Conor working on footwork, cardio, and short combinations to make Khabib pay every time he comes forward. Khabib's plan would probably be similar to before: why fix what isn't broken? He'd look to close the distance, grab a hold of Conor, and make him carry his weight. But this time, knowing Conor will prepare even harder for the wrestling, Khabib might mix in more striking. We've seen him drop opponents with his overhand right, and he could use that to surprise Conor and set up takedowns more easily. This fight would basically be striker versus grappler all over again, but with both men smarter, sharper, and ready to adjust. One of the most interesting things about a 2025 rematch between Khabib and Conor would be seeing how their bodies and styles have changed over the years. Conor has clearly gotten bigger since his featherweight days. These days he looks more like a welterweight, with extra muscle on his frame. That extra size might give him more power in his punches, but it could also make his gas tank a bit smaller. His team would have to find the perfect balance, big enough to hit hard, but light enough to keep moving for 5 rounds if needed. Khabib, on the other hand, has been out of the cage for years. He's stayed in shape, coaching and training, but fight shape is a whole different level. It would be interesting to see how quickly he could get back that relentless pace and pressure he's known for. His style has always been about grinding people down with cardio and strength, so he'd need a solid camp to make sure he's still that unstoppable force. Seeing how these two show up physically would be a huge part of the story. It might even decide who has the edge when the cage door closes. The mental game between Khabib and Conor has always been just as fascinating as the fight itself. Conor is one of the best trash talkers in sports history. He knows how to get under an opponent's skin, make them emotional, and force them to fight his kind of fight. Before their first clash, he spent weeks throwing verbal jabs, cracking jokes, and hyping the fight so much that the entire world was watching. If they fought again, you can bet Conor would crank that energy up even more, turning every press conference into a spectacle. But here's the thing. Khabib doesn't really play that game. He stays calm, focused, and almost cold when it comes to trash talk. In fact, last time he used Conor's words as motivation, not a distraction. He even said that the fight was just business for Conor, but for him it was personal. That clash of personalities is part of what makes this matchup so intense. Conor would try to turn up the heat before fight night, but Khabib's calm, no-nonsense approach might once again keep him in control. The mind games would be almost as entertaining as the fight itself. If Khabib and Conor fought again, the result would shake up the entire lightweight division. If Conor were to win, it would probably launch him straight back into title talks, maybe even set up a trilogy fight with Khabib. Fans would go crazy for a 1-1 score and a final chapter to settle the rivalry once and for all. It would also give Conor a chance to prove he's still relevant in a division stacked with killers like Islam Makhachev, Dustin Poirier, and Charles Oliveira. If Khabib came back and won, especially after years away, it would be a huge statement, showing he's still the king of the division. That could lead to another title shot for him, or maybe even a super fight against his protege Islam, which would be a wild storyline in itself. Either way, this fight would affect everyone in the top 10. Rankings would shift, future title fights would change, and the UFC would have months of storylines to build on. In short, the winner wouldn't just get bragging rights. They'd completely rewrite the future of the division and maybe the whole UFC lightweight history. So, after looking at everything, the legacy, the game plans, the physical changes, the mental battle, and the future of the division, what are the actual chances of each guy winning if they fought again? Let's be real. Khabib would probably come in as the favorite, just like last time. He's never been beaten, he dominated Conor in their first fight, and his wrestling is still one of the most dangerous weapons in MMA. Even if he's been retired for a few years, his style doesn't rely on crazy speed or reflexes. It's about control, pressure, and breaking guys down. If he gets Conor down early, it could be a repeat of UFC 229. But Conor shouldn't be counted out. He's still one of the cleanest strikers in the sport, and he only needs one perfect shot to change everything. In a rematch, he'd be better prepared for the wrestling, probably in great shape, and hungry to prove he can do what no one else has done, beat Khabib. His best chance is in the first 2 rounds before Khabib's pressure slows him down. If we had to put numbers on it, it might look something like this. Khabib 65%, Conor 35%. Not a blowout, but definitely in Khabib's favor, and that's what makes this matchup so exciting, because even if Khabib is favored, there's always that chance that Conor lands the shot heard around the world. That's why fans would pay anything to see it. At the end of the day, if Khabib and Conor ever fought again, it wouldn't just be a UFC main event, it would be the event, the kind of fight that takes over Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, everywhere. People who don't even watch MMA would tune in just to see what happens. The build-up alone would be crazy. Press conferences would trend worldwide, every stare down would go viral, and highlight channels would be running non-stop clips of UFC 229 to remind everyone how wild their first fight was. And you know what? This is the perfect time for a comeback like this. Look around, Mike Tyson stepped back into the ring and sold out arenas. Floyd Mayweather keeps popping up for huge fights. Legends coming back is the trend right now, so why not Khabib? Why not give the fans one last massive night, the fight everyone has been dreaming about since 2018? Fans would be counting down the days, people would be making predictions, arguing about who wins on Reddit, TikTok, and YouTube. Sports bars would be packed, fight parties would be everywhere, and the atmosphere would feel like a world championship boxing match. Because in a way, that's exactly what it would be. Maybe it never happens. Maybe Khabib stays retired and Conor moves on to other fights. But just maybe the stars will line up, the money will be right, and we'll get to see it. If that day ever comes, you can bet the entire world will stop and watch. And no matter who wins, it would be one of those nights where we'd all say, yeah, I remember where I was when that fight happened.